As a community, we'll request the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. It's on page 72. And in requesting the 3 refuges, we'll request them in Pali, and then it will be call and response with the monastics. And then we'll do the 5 precepts with the monastics. We'll start by taking 3 bows. Bow. 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 Mayang Bante Tisaranena Sabha Vansha Sivani Yachama Dutiyampi Mayang Bante Tisaranena Sabha Vansha Sivani
Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisarana kamanang nitithang. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
Hame sumichachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Kame sumitachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from false and harmful speech.
I undertake the precept to refrain from false and harmful speech.
Sura meraya maja pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura meraya maja pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
Imani pancha sikha pandani silena sugatin yanti silena bhoga sambada silena niputin yanti tasma silang visodaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Bow. Bow. Bow.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. This evening we began with taking refuges and precepts, and I think it's really important to keep coming back to these fundamental foundations of the practice. Oftentimes we look for techniques, we look for methods, we look for solutions, and we forget that in reality it's the foundations, the fundamentals that really provide the real nourishment for our practice, our Buddhist practice. Just recollecting just the refuge of Buddha. I said one of the literal translations of Buddha is the one who knows. And that just coming back to this quality of knowing, being able to rest in the quality of knowing, having confidence in the quality of knowing, is a huge support for our practice. Reflecting on Dhamma there is a fundamental truth that we can keep returning to. There is a kind of like an elemental way things are. We don't have to analyze it all that much, figure it out all that much, pull it apart and put it back together again all that much. All you need to do is, there is a way things are. It's like this. It's not complicated. It's not even distant. It's always, the Dhamma, that the Buddha points to is a here and now Dhamma. So that learning how to trust that, learning how to come back to that. And Sangha as refuge. It's the refuge in practice, in integrity, just in doing it. Which of course is a part of the precepts. When we have a refuge in that quality of just virtue, integrity, it's not a moralistic aspect of the or perspective, and it's not. It's more of just aligning oneself with something that is that we already intuitively recognize as wholesome, beneficial. Also, just something that leads to happiness and well-being, and learning how to pay attention to it. One of the qualities of happiness that the Buddha points to is just the happiness of, say, blamelessness. Just not in that sense of enjoying the happiness of non-remorse, not regret, not regret. So not getting caught in something that is blameworthy. So that just refraining from not taking life, not taking what isn't given, all the precepts. Just is it's a natural way to experience well-being and happiness. It's so harmless, blameless, quite something to really delight in. Also, there's some aspects of the precepts that are helpful to reflect on, because they're quite different from Judeo-Christian approach to moral precepts. One is just the word that we use for precepts is like when we take the precepts, the sikha pada. It's a compound word. Pada means like foot, foundation, base. Sikha is to learn, to study, to train. It's a basis of learning, studying, educating oneself, training. So it's like, and we make that decision. Oh, I want to train like this. I want to learn about this. I want to figure this out. I want to study this, using actions of body and speech. That's what we learn from. That's what we study. That's what we practice with. How do we live together as human beings in a way that is harmless, has an integrity to it, and it's a way that we lay a foundation of well-being for ourselves. on a certain level, the whole the study of the Buddhist teachings is it's an education, a training. One of the monks from Abhayagiri, right now he's in Thailand, before he went to Thailand. He loves studying and reading, and he went through the scriptures and the discourses of the Buddha, and all the different times that the Buddha repeated himself, thus you should train yourselves, which is Sikha. Thus you should train yourselves, thus you should study or learn. He tracked all those down and then made a little booklet and left that out of Abhayagiri for the rest of us. And you realize, the Buddha put a lot of emphasis on this. And you realize it's like an education, learning how to educate ourselves in what are the ways of creating happiness and well-being for ourselves and others, and not increasing suffering. It's a noble education, and really worth studying, learning about. So the keeping of the precepts is one of the perspectives that Ajahn Chah used to emphasize, is that the function of the precepts was to give us the opportunity to understand our intention, volition, in Pali, the Cetana, the volition of the mind. It's not so much to keep us in line or make us feel guilty about things. It's about how do we understand when we commit to a certain standard of, say, of harmlessness, of honesty. Then we've got a mirror to start to see what does our mind do? Where does it go to? What are the impulses there? What are the volitions? What are the intentions? What are the poles of habit and impulse? Because that's, in terms of training ourselves and practicing, we really have to understand that. Because you can have all the ideals you want, but you know what you should do and what the world should be like, but it's completely useless when your mind is completely out of control and you're just dragged around by your impulses and your habits. And you can't really do anything about it until you understand it and see it more clearly. So that one of the fundamental uses of those precepts is just to give us an opportunity to understand volition, impulse, the intention within the mind. Another aspect of precepts is the word sila is that it's what is it that we're trying to cultivate? What is it that we rely on in order to establish ourselves in the precepts? Or what are we trying to foster when we we train ourselves in the precepts and in the Buddhist teachings. And the quality that is always pointed to is the quality of hiriyottapa in Pali, and I say it in the scriptural language because the English is so atrocious. Really difficult to translate into English. It's early translators translated it as shame, and hiri is sort of shame and fear of wrongdoing, and which is very moralistic. But there's a certain, it's not that it's wrong, but in the sense there's a certain feeling of embarrassment or shame. I don't want to use the word shame because it's just too strong. But the reason why it comes up is because one respects oneself. So one really doesn't want to do something that's harming others, or is not really completely honest and forthright, because one respects oneself. Has this real respect for oneself that one doesn't want to do or say anything or move in certain ways that would create that. So there's this inner respect for one's own goodness and one's own capability. And then there's ottapa, there's a shrinking back from wrongdoing because one respects others. You realize that all of our actions have results, and if it affects others, then that's unfortunate. So because there's a fundamental respect for others that one wants to protect and foster. So this sense of hiriyottapa is what is the support for the adhering to the precepts, not because it's some ideal, but there's a kind of this fundamental respect for ourselves and others, and so we want to really nurture these beautiful qualities, and it comes back to feeding into and supporting this happiness of non-remorse, of blamelessness that one can delight in, which is the Buddha's. Even though the Buddha uses dukkha, suffering, as a fundamental point of reflection in his teachings, by putting that front and center, it motivates us more clearly to figure out what is it that really is conducive to our happiness and well-being. What is it that really nourishes these aspects of contentment and delight. So that of course, again comes back to that learning, studying, educating oneself. So part of it is the precepts, being grounded in refuges, to these fundamentals. And as we lay a strong foundation, have a strong base, and then the practice becomes really so much easier when it comes from a really solid base, a solid core. And then allows us to direct attention to, say, the aspects of, the Buddha talks about suffering, but he also talks about non-suffering. And so say the Four Noble Truths are Four Noble Truths as opposed to, say, the One Noble Truth of suffering. There is a truth of the cessation of suffering. And that quality of cessation has many nuances and flavors that are really important to explore. Part of it is recognizing that, that there actually is cessation happening all the time. It isn't as if it's just sort of this on and on, endless, unmitigated experience of difficulty and suffering. There's an experiences of the cessation, the ending of those experiences all the time. We tend not to pay attention to it because it's, we usually what our mind gravitates toward is oh, woe is me, I'm suffering again. It is the way the mind works. It grabs our attention, and we have to direct attention to something that when there's an experience of something a bit more extreme, then we tends to get our attention, either the experience of suffering, discontent, dissatisfaction. It grabs our attention. In the same way that when we're really happy, it's really exciting, it's really exhilarating, that grabs our attention. And but usually it keeps going up and down, and you have to look for things that are a bit more subtle in terms of can we actually, we can't sort of live with that. Even if we experience this sort of exhilaration, excitement, real pleasure, it's really hard to keep that going all the time. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to keep that going. So it gets tiring. And so then it loses its significance sometimes. So then, what is cessation is the Buddha pointing to? And it's pointing to things that are much more, say, that easeful, clear, still, peaceful, and that's something that's more sustainable. Because you start realizing, well, that's actually, it's not as if that's so far away. It's like when we're not reacting to either the extremes of pleasure or pain, happiness and suffering, joy and sorrow, then there's an ease and clarity that is actually accessible, and that's way more sustainable. And you realize it's actually there if we tune into it. So that's like Nirodha is more of a settling. It's like just the word. I mean, it's usually translated as cessation, but it's not. Sometimes that the words that come from the scriptures are hard to put into the concepts of the English language. Tends to be English tends to be so black and white, good and bad, right and wrong, and that's complicated. Whereas, say, like the word, and even with the word cessation, it's like say the cessation of suffering. Somehow, we feel of it, and the image that's evoked is, there is this suffering, and then we've got to we've got to make it end. But the and that's part of that meaning. But it's more also it's a meaning that's like it's not a problem. Like when suffering is no longer a problem, we make a problem out of it. So something. Then there's that opens it up to all sorts of possibilities. Because it's also say cessation of desire. We spend a lot of energy sort of trying to stamp out desire. But if say like a desire and attachment are no longer a problem, then suffering is no longer a problem. It ceases. It doesn't have the same fuel, and that's one of the fundamental insights that are part and parcel of the Buddhist teachings are these causal principles. When there is the fuel for something, then there's going to be a result. So that learning how to not feed that process of creating problems, not learning how to not feed that process of making things difficult. And so much of it is just our perspective, our identification with it. This is me. This is who I am. This is mine. That whole self-identification, which doesn't mean we have to then try to annihilate self. It's what doesn't have to be a problem. It didn't really. It's like it's really interesting with the different forms of attachment or clinging that the Buddha points to, in terms of attachment clinging to desire, attachment clinging to views and opinions, attachment clinging to precept and practice, attachment and clinging to the assumption of self. The Buddha doesn't say attachment to self. It says attachment to the assumption of self. Because that whole self position is created. it's conjured up out of, we've got a body, we've got a mind, it's got to do something. So conjures up and says, me. That's what we come up with. And then we carry it around. And then we get tired. And say, oh. But we've managed to conjure it up, beat ourselves with it, and then, what's wrong? It's allowing that kind of identification program to just cease, or to not make it a problem, not carry it with it, not. So that aspect of cessation it has these different nuances that are really interesting to explore. It's like, sometimes we're in the question and answer sessions today at GB's, by asking, encouraging people to reflect on non-desire. In that sense that it's not so much that we yes, there is desire, there is a thing, it's kind of ordinary. What about non-desire? Can we pay attention to non-desire? And usually what we try to do is we say, I'm so full of desires, I've got to get rid of them. And that's another project that we take on, and it comes to be a burden. So that just there is desire. What about non-desire? How do I feel that? How do I experience that? Where's that reside? How can I tune into that? And you're saying, that's there too. We missed it. Again, we get hooked into the things that grab our attention, and forget to tune into what's actually there, and what has more possibilities of actually allowing us to experience peace, contentment, well-being, clarity. Learning how to tune into that. Because that's also just that the Buddha's middle way is one is there's a middle way of a practice of training, which is establishing oneself in the principles of non-harmony, mindfulness, reflection. But then a middle way of view, so that the aspects of a middle way in terms of self, like there's the propping up of self, there's the self-identification is one extreme. But then there's the other extreme, is sort of annihilation of self, trying to get rid of self. And the Buddha's teaching on non-self is actually middle way, in the sense of, all of the things that we identify are not actually self. They arise, they cease, they pass away. And it's quite explicit in the language that the Buddha uses. So atta is self. But the other extreme of, annihilation of self is viradhammo. And atmata, it's not self. Because sometimes being unfamiliar with the terminology, sometimes they, not self, that's not like I can't have self. But it's sort of, I remember one time, I was the abbot of Chat, and somebody writing a letter asking to come and stay and ordain. And this whole long letter talking about themselves and their intention to come to Thailand and ordain. They did it, wrote the whole thing with no personal pronouns. It's like there's so much self involved in that. And it's goes unrecognized. And it's tedious to try to do that. But so that this middle way of non-self is just saying, oh yeah, this is non-self. It's not self. It's there. I've got these feelings, these expressions, these impulses. But it's not really my central core of my being, what my true nature is. They arise, they cease, and go. No big deal. I can come back to seeing that, knowing it. And within that knowing, there's a settling, there's a ceasing, there's a place of resolution. So that the teachings of the Buddha are sometimes they're just too simple for us to get. We keep looking past it. There must be something more. So we can keep looking past. Truth is right here. We keep looking somewhere else. So that being willing to come back to just these. What are the fundamentals? What are the root things? So what does it feel like when we commit to that? It's like refuges and precepts, mindfulness, and awareness, being attentive, being present. What's it feel like? Come back to that. Learning to trust in that. So that gives a tremendous amount of energy and well-being. We expend huge amounts of energy trying to figure it all out, trying to get the right technique, trying to get the right method, switching them around and getting, and just letting it all settle, letting it cease. Sometimes that's scary. Again, we rely on our agendas of self to have some kind of what we think is meaning for ourselves. But you have to be reflecting. Well, what is actually truly peaceful? What is actually truly satisfying? And it isn't getting what we desire, fulfilling our cherished views and opinions. Those always come up short. But it's just being able to plug into these qualities of awareness, of clarity, of fundamental integrity, a clear knowing, sense of compassion, kindness. And we realize, well, those are the things that really nourish us as human beings. So to keep, and it's something that we know already, really. But just giving ourselves the reminders and the confidence to keep plugging back into it, and realize that that's actually what takes you to clear realization. So offer that reflection this evening.
Dhamma Kachaya Sadhukaram Dadamase
I'll open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Listening to you this evening helped me to take a look at this experience that I've had just lately quite a bit, and it happens, of course, frequently, is this relationship between, well, in respect to just daily life. If I don't worry about it, I don't have control. There's this feeling inside of me that believes that. And I just thought to myself, well, maybe I can try. If I don't worry about it, do I have any more control over it?
Right.
You know, and I realized that could be helpful. You know, simply in saying that. If I don't worry about it, is there any less control or more control?
Right. Yeah, because we think that we're somehow if we're being irresponsible if we don't worry and fret.
Things will fall apart.
Yes, things will fall apart.
Yeah.
What would the world would just collapse into chaos without me worrying about it.
And I know
What exactly do you do?
Right.
I carry that around a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's really, when you speak about it, it's very ridiculous.
Right, which is really helpful to just act like that articulating of our, well, what's actually happening here. And that's an aspect of knowing, is just being able to listen to what our minds say and to have a context around it. And then you realize, well, that's actually absurd.
Well, and I have to mention how self is caught up in that sense of, control. And that's, it's just, I guess, a delusion. It's just not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you call the middle road again, or where we kind of like not going through the extremes of self, just being kind of centered? What did you call that again?
Oh, well, the different expressions of self, of not self, of annihilation of self.
I think what you were referring to was the middle road, where you're not, going to the extreme of completely identifying with self or complete annihilation of self. What did you call the middle ground? Do you have a word for it?
Oh, the middle ground is the Buddha's teaching on non-self.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's called non-self.
Yeah. So it's an option. It's a middle ground option that we can exercise, because the tendency is to swing to that extreme of annihilation, pushing away, or the propping up of the sense of self. But then seeing that, actually all these machinations are actually, they don't have a real essence to them, so we can allow them to be non-self. And it's tremendously freeing.
Is it kind of like moderation in all things, including moderation?
Yes and no. In the sense of, sometimes we think of a middle way as we split the difference and we get away with whatever we want. But it's more like, it's a non-identification that's really important. Yeah.
Can you just say a little more about the connection between conduct and happiness?
Conduct and happiness? there's a word that the Buddha uses, and it's usually translated as skillful or wholesome, and it's related to actions of both body, speech, and mind. And they're intrinsically conducive to happiness and well-being. So that those, say, actions of and restraint is an action. So there's some like restraining from unskillful conduct is a wholesome conduct. So that just sometimes when we see ourselves restraining or refraining from, say, speaking in anger, and you read, oh man, I was able to catch that. And that's you can feel, and from a Buddhist perspective, it's really good to notice that and to feel good about it. So, that you can take delight in the skillful or wholesome actions that we've done and the qualities that we're cultivating, and it's actually an important piece of the path of practice, cultivation of actions, body, speech, and mind that lead to happiness and well-being. There's scattered through the discourses that the Buddha gives. There's a kind of a stock phrases in terms of causal processes, and there's different kind of starting points. One of them is a wholesome or skillful action, and others are wise reflection. Another is faith or confidence. There's a couple others, but anyway, through these different starting points, and it goes into this stock phrase of from those there's the arising of delight, and then with delight as a cause and condition, there's a rising of joy, and with the arising of joy as cause and condition, and then there's a rising of tranquility, sort of physical well-being, a physical well-being. With the arising of tranquility, there's a rising of happiness, of sukha. So there's these different types of happiness on earth, and with the arising of happiness, there's the arising of stability of mind, of samadhi. And in some of the couple of discourses, the Buddha actually stops and emphasizes that point. So the happy mind is easily concentrated. And then it goes on from, let's say, with meditative stillness as a cause and condition, and there's a rising of knowledge of the way things truly are. And but it's kind of interesting in that the Buddha points to there's this pay attention to these qualities of happiness and well-being, because that's what leads to stability and stillness. And whereas, and I think we tend to approach from the place, when I get my meditation together, then I'm going to be happy. But the Buddha goes the other way around. So when you pay attention to your happiness, then your meditation starts to really take on. Okay? We've got a whole weekend ahead. Okay, we'll pay respects to the front. Good to see you all here. It's been a while since I've been here.
I have a question. What's the proper response to making mistakes? Doesn't feel like self-chastisement, but also not brushing it aside and ignoring it completely. So, can you talk about that?
Okay. I would say the proper response to making mistakes is learning from it. That's all we really need to do. Making mistakes is really ordinary, and the whole self-chastisement is not particularly useful. Kind of not acknowledging or not recognizing is not very useful. So, but recognize, okay, that was a mistake, and then recognizing it, learning from it, and starting over, or adding on, taking a different tack. So it's just by learning from that, and that's the only way we learn, actually. Wasn't Suzuki Roshi, I think, who said, practice is one mistake after another? So that's really how we learn.
I'm feeling a bit silly, but I can't seem to find the right place in my apartment to meditate. And there's a part of me that just wants to sit at the edge of the tub in the bathroom. It's strange. But I'm particularly antsy about this. Like, this is not right, this is not right. And I guess I do know that this is how the mind
Right.
But it's awfully embarrassing lately. I know that the space is there, and I know that the time is there, but it's as if I have a rope pulling me forward. There are worries too, lots of worries. But as soon as I listen to a Dhamma talk, I realize that going back to my breath is where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Especially lately, there's someone that called the breath I think it's the alligator breathing, where it's in the alligator or crocodile, it's in the lower abdomen. And with that image, that seems to help me come back to it when I think about those incredible creatures. So anyways, I'm wandering a little bit, but I think we kind of get the idea, and I think many of us go through this. How do I find the comfort to quiet the mind?
Yeah, I think just part of the, we find different ways to distract ourselves. Why do something right now when we can put it off till some other time? So that ends up keeping us from actually doing the meditation itself. So that it doesn't really matter where you do it. The main thing is that where you do it is inside your body and mind. That's where you do your meditation, and so just learning how to keep returning to that kind of, basically that's our home, and you want to make it your home, and say, as opposed to some external circumstance or place, or so that just getting more and more comfortable within ourselves, and you find the meditation starts to you start carrying it with you.
Because I've been there.
Yeah.
It's just that I kind of lost my way.
Sort of a follow-up to Margaret's question. This morning, I listened to someone reading the Parayana Sutta from the Nipada Sutta. At the very end, it's the crossing the flood, and it was read so beautifully, and I was reminded again that the craving is the thing, the bhavatanha, the craving, the becoming is all keeping me stuck in where I'm at. And, I get the thing about there's chanda, and then there's tanha, and there's a difference, and I find myself sometimes in one, sometimes in the other, but invariably end up in the desire to become the good meditator, the good Buddhist, the good practitioner, the thing, and then I'm going, this is all about being ignorant to the fact that I guess pretty much everything. I get, it's like a catch-22. I just go, I'm chasing my tail much of the time. It's kind of rah. How do I put it down? I know it's I go, but I need some more tools.
Well, one of the things that I find and keep for myself and encourage others is coming back into the body, paying attention to the body, paying attention to posture, the actual sensations within the body, the touch, because Yeah, it's like Ajahn Chah. The mind's a liar and a cheat. There's no point in trying to reason with it or figure it out. It's like Ajahn Chah also said. It's like the our defilements have wisdom also, in the sense that they come up with all the logic and reason to distract us or to complicate things, so that just not investing too much into the analyzing of the mind, right? The figuring out of the mental tracks that the mind goes down, and come back to the body. Because if you don't have an anchor of clarity and stability, then all of what you observe of the mind is just proliferation, and just it's a waste of time. Then just come back, create an anchor for yourself, and create a solid base of attention and awareness. And then you start to see things more clearly. And you've got a perspective. Because it isn't all about letting go either. In the sense that one needs to cultivate skillful habits, one has to cultivate wholesome energy, one has to cultivate reflective investigations, but if it doesn't have an anchor, then it's adrift. So that coming back to that mindfulness of the body are really important. Want to give some perspectives?
Well, what does non-desire look like? Right now. What does non-desire look like? Like if you just listen. Right? Just listen. What does non-desire look like right now? It's nothing special. Yeah, it's kind of ho-hum. But that, I think, is one of the basic insights of what right effort is. Because we want to get free of all this rubbish, right? And sometimes we taste moments of beauty and deep stillness. And then, of course, the whole craving mind gets enacted for achieving that, and we've lost the plot again. So I've always found that, like, the first step is to kind of establish awareness and establish non-desire. And you can do that all the time by attending to the ordinary. So what does non-desire feel like? And then to use language of, I find using the language of non-desire is quite helpful as a kind of inner coaching or a kind of inner mirroring of what you're doing. So I'll use language like non-resistance. Now when I put that word into consciousness, non-resistance, I tend to notice resistance. Just by the very fact that word helps me to notice that. Or putting non-becoming. Now that's different than saying to myself, I shouldn't become, and I should get rid of vibhavatana, that's still a me, trying to do something else. But to actually pop that word in, non-becoming, and then notice what's going on, then I find that mirroring of where I'm actually coming from, I can see the body trying to achieve something, or meditation trying to achieve something. And then non-resistance, non-desire. This kind of non-language I've always found very, very edifying, because it shows me its opposite. Another thing I do is if I have anything strong in consciousness, So like if I feel like it's been really hot this summer, here, us it's been like really, really California hot, I think. Had the biggest drought in 120 years we had in Ontario. Very, very dry. So it was, anyway, that's a digression for a fellow Canadian. But if I feel really, really hot, then I'll ask myself, what's not hot? We did this, Matthew, right? When you were there. What's not hot? Or if I feel, anything extreme, some kind of extreme emotion comes up, what's not angry? Because much of our practice is always this doing to become someone else, which is a part of our training. But sometimes we don't notice that the transcendent is always there. Stillness is always there. And so we're forever engaged with the objects of emotion and thought and memory and body and so on. And the engagement is so often from goodness, from idealism, but it's always to become something. So when you use what I find, you use non-language, non-becoming. Like even your question, like having to meditate. I mean, you just sit on the edge of the bathtub and say, what's it like to feel like you have to meditate? That's non-desire. It's the very compulsion to do desire is one of your many lists, right? I gotta do this, gotta do my yoga, I gotta exercise, can't eat too many carrots or whatever, and it goes on and on. But actually to bring consciousness to non-desire is something you can do all the time. Non-desire. And I think, probably because I was very influenced by Luang Pors, listening. I use listening a lot. And getting to understand what like a receptive non-desire presence is. What's that like? Getting a feeling from that. And then launching forth into whatever practice you want to do, because then it seems to me you have the right attitude right there, just in a millisecond. When it really seems hopeless, like I've been practicing for so long, and all that, I'm not getting anywhere. Just say, what is it that's not that? And because the silence is always there, it's not so far away, but we're so enthralled by the objects. I find that really interesting. What's not hot? You say, the tea is sweet. It's not another sense object. It's the knowing. It's the clarity of presence. And rather than always having to reorganize the objects of consciousness, what is it that's not hot? And that comes from Luang Por Dun, is it? Luang Por Dun, the Four Noble Truths. Oh, yeah. Is it Dun? Yeah. That formulation, you probably heard about it. The mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. Mind knowing mind, right? And you can do that all the time. You don't have to be some super sunyata freak, to do that. It's not so far away. It's always like very, very present. So you do things like, I feel really upset, but what's not upset? And that's the mind knowing the mind, awareness knowing awareness. So some way, it seems to me, before one sets forth in one's meditation, to establish right presence, non-desire, and then picking up something to sustain that. That's the way I operate. So good luck in the bathtub. Why do you want to meditate?
Well, because I know that it helps me to be deeper in my body, and I feel clearer in many cases when I am able to be there.
So you have had good results?
Oh, I've had actually very, very good results a while back.
So is this something like physiological because of age or something like that? You think?
Oh, no.
No.
There's just some circumstances now in my life that have swooped me up.
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
You know, and I'm trying. Well, I don't know.
So that's creating agitation.
Yes.
Yeah. And is it changing to the good?
It seems to be slowly,
Okay.
but it will be a while.
Yeah.
And so it's right here is a lot of opportunity for practice.
For practice.
Especially since it's going to be a slow process.
Right.
And I kind of go back and forth between, oh my God, I can't do this, to bring myself up and just sort of settling everything and being free for a little while.
Do you do any chanting?
I do not, but that's
When you can't do anything like refined, sit down or whatever. I remember when Luang Pors was going through the Hampstead Vihara ringer, he was going through a very difficult clash of personalities when we first got to London from Thailand, which he just walked into it. Poor man. And it really, very, very, very difficult. And he didn't know what to do, so he just bowed. He just bowed and bowed and bowed and bowed. And sometimes when you're kind of really being hit by life, something simple like just doing a tipi so 108 times or bowing 1,000,000 times or something, it's so obvious, and you just do it. You just do it. And then somehow you're in the moment. Yeah? Something quite simple.
yes, because I've gotten into the habit of doing that before I eat, before a meal, and it is very lovely and freeing.
Yeah. And if you have a history of developing chanting like we do, then those words and the body language and the imagery is very emotive of calmness, of faith. So you plug into the good karma of your rituals. Rituals are really good that way.
And I do have a seeking.
That's really yeah. You'll be fine. You won't come.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about working with the hindrance of aversion and just some thoughts about pulling it up, for instance.
Well, I mean, there's many ways of working with aversion. I mean, part of it is, one is reflecting that you are always going to be somebody else's idiot. Where you have aversion, I can't believe what an idiot that person is. How could that person be such an idiot? And realizing that, we always will, we see the faults and the flaws and the difficult things that irritate, and it's perfectly clear to us how stupid and insensitive people are. And we tend to forget that, or it's not that we forget, it's just that we've got, we've got an excuse, or we've got the proper rationale for doing whatever stupid things we do that are irritating to others. And so that it's easy to forget that. So that bringing that up in our mind and recollecting that, we're always going to be somebody else's idiot. So it gives us an opportunity to sort of put ourselves in other people's position and then be a lot more patient and compassionate And that way we can be a lot more accepting. And so that irritation or anger or ill will doesn't have the same landing place. Because, righteous indignation is a really good landing place for anger. But if it's patience and acceptance, and it doesn't really get much traction. So then you can just let it go. And that's really helpful. Then being able to put oneself in a place of empathizing and having a broader view of what the peoples and ourselves are how it works in reality. So then also paying attention to what is it that what kind of view are we holding that is the basis for our anger, our ill will, or aversion, or irritation. What do we want? Because it's we've got a view of how the world should be, how other people should be, how the situation should be, and as long as we hold that view, then we'll get upset or angry. But if we're willing to question that view and say, well, I can change that view. I don't have to hold that view. That view is quite flexible. There's not an intrinsic reality to that. So then irritation or ill will, aversion doesn't have the same doesn't have that same energy, and so then we can start to relinquish, release, get some space around it, and then it just doesn't stick in the mind, and it just feels a whole lot better, because that's again that sense of mindfulness of the body. You start paying attention to, well, what does anger and ill will, what's that feel like? Oh wow, it doesn't feel very good. So then being able to relax around that, and then that dissipates.
Can I ask you, that story with Luang Pors, there's a famous story you might have read in some of the books, talks of Luang Pors, where Madhu, palmist looks at Luang Pors' hand and says, "You've got a lot of anger." Luang Pors says, "Yeah, but I don't use it." Do you remember that is true? Yeah. So I've got you here. I don't get to see him. You've read Luang Por Liam's No Worries, his enlightenment piece. Okay, so I asked him this question. I asked him about the Luang Pors story, and he gave me the usual answer. He just looked at me. It wasn't very helpful. Yeah, looked up. So he didn't get the answer. So now I'm asking you. But if you read No Worries, in it, Luang Por Liam said his mind hasn't moved since 1969. Right? Nothing. So then when I look at Luang Pors, that I think, well, so what's going on there? You're just going to look at me too, aren't you? I can sense it now. You see where sort of my conundrum here is? Don't think about it too much. Yeah. But it really struck me as like Luang Por, that Luang Por. Has everyone read No Worries? That piece is stunning, isn't it? You read it and my little stubble. It's really just so inspiring. But I was kind of struck by that difference.
Yeah, well, Luang Pors is like for him to say his mind doesn't move, it doesn't mean. For Luang Pors to say his mind doesn't move, it isn't if he doesn't, because he engages a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's saying it doesn't move toward attachment or delusion, right?
But the kind of
agitation, because he's really, he's so kind of stable within himself.
It just seems to me like there's a kind of level of eradication of the kilesas there, which is more profound than Luang Por Chah's.
It's just an expression.
Just an expression.
I would think, yeah.
Anyways, I
don't think Luang Por would say.
They're both beautiful beings. Yeah, it's not like B team, A team. Anyway, I was very struck by that.
Yeah.
Carry on.
When I meditate, I start off with the breath just to get my mind calm. The normal chatter starts up. You see those as distractions. But then different sort of language and things come into my mind that are potential insight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, is this just a distraction to the calming? Or is this really insight that I should be listening to and taking to heart? Can you talk about how to know the difference?
Well, the knowing of the difference really comes. You can. It's more in terms of, say, like being able to tune in to the feeling at the time, or in hindsight. In the sense that it helps the mind to become more calm, more clear, creates more understanding, that settles the mind, settles the heart. Because I think one of the things that we do, say as meditators, is we create a kind of a logical equation of I think, therefore I suffer, and then if I didn't think, then I wouldn't suffer. So we think if I could only stop my thinking, then I wouldn't suffer anymore. But that's actually not really true, because as the thought processes are really intrinsic to the cultivation, both of calm as well as insight. But it's the either unbridled thinking processes or the confused and deluded thinking processes that take us to a place of suffering. So a lot of it is being able to see, well, what sort of thoughts are really helpful for uplifting the mind, helping the mind be more clear, more stable, more peaceful. Because peaceful doesn't necessarily mean totally still, because the mind can reflect and investigate, and then have a clear insight into the nature of either the external world or the internal world. So that learning how to use our thought processes to support our spiritual aspiration, our kind of desire for the Dhamma, and because that's it's actually there's an idiom that because again it's sort of like we're not supposed to have desire, and then but there's there's an idiom in the Pali is that, say, because of that desire for the Dhamma, that delight in the Dhamma, then there's actually an opportunity for an opening and understanding. So that it's just learning how to pay attention to what is it that if we pursue this line of thought or application of mind, what's its result? Does it stir the mind up? Does it? Because even we can be having thoughts of Dhamma, but then it's churning. It's really not very settled, not very clear, and so that that's helpful to really let's set that aside. Come back to something settling that helps the continuity of attention and mindfulness to establish itself. But at other times there can be there's thought processes that are reflecting, and it's really deeply settling because it's really tapping into this is the way it is. So you have to pay attention to both in terms of in the present moment what's it feel like, and then what's the in hindsight what's it feel like. Yeah, Shelley.
This is a question for Viradhammo.
There you go.
Just because I've been talking to you in my head for months now.
Your name?
So, I'm Shelley, and
Nice to meet you.
I have actually a picture of your top of your head on my refrigerator.
That's very reassuring. Just the top of my head.
You're behind one for the tomatoes.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. And
I have recently been reading suttas for the first time. I fell on a compilation of books, a handful of leaves, and it's been very accessible to me. And I'm glad I haven't read the suttas until now, because I probably wouldn't have gotten so much out of it. However, there's one question that I've been looking for an answer to, and I've got several Ajahn friends who have been helping me. And they know that I'll ask a lot of questions, and they just keep coming. And so if they're here in the room and think they've heard the question before, oh well. So one of my issues is comparing mind. And so I've been wondering what the Buddha had talked about comparing mind, because I actually haven't really heard in a way that I can hear from you in your talks on comparing mind. And the Ajahns referred me to the concept of conceit. And reading the suttas, we talked about conceit really hasn't been clicking for me. And so it really leads me to realize how important it is for me to have living Dhamma. So that's an aside from. So comparing mind. So one of the talks that Pasanno did not too long ago, the punchline, I'm not being frivolous, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. The punchline the Buddha said was, everything. If you get it, that everything's impermanent. It's all good. But that was what he ended up with. That was the fundamental. So, okay. So how do I apply that to there is suffering, the end of suffering, comparing mind, and so not to be. So comparing mind and impermanence.
How's that go?
So what's your question? Sorry, I'm not quick.
The question is, how do I utilize the concept of conceit to reduce my suffering within the concept of impermanence or temporary? It's like, is it that, I see I'm suffering because I'm comparing myself to Corky. Because she's whatever. She's better than I am at doing transcription.
But so
I
is
myself suffer, but do I say to myself, this suffering is temporary?
so is your question specifically about the comparing mind being a source of suffering? Is that
And how can I use the concept of impermanence to work with that?
so?
Could I?
So if I have it right, somehow the comparing mind is something that afflicts you,
Correct.
and somehow you want to find out how to go beyond it and go beyond that affliction. Is that roughly what you're asking? Okay, so comparing mind. Why is it an affliction?
Why is it an affliction?
Why is it an affliction for you? Because comparing is natural.
Conditions. Causes and conditions, I guess. Because
Like comparing is natural, we need to do it. But why is it a source of suffering?
good question.
Well,
because I don't see that it's impermanent. No, that's...
that sounds like too Buddhist to me.
No.
There's no, seriously, why would you say, because we need to compare, right? So it's a natural function of intelligence. Why would you say, for you particularly, it is a source of suffering?
That's a good point. So, for example, I've been trying to feel my body lately. So one of the things I do is I'm a windsurfer. This is an example. And I'm sailing along, I'm windsurfing along, and I see somebody in front of me doing a really cool maneuver over and over. And my mind goes into comparing mind. Oh, I'm not as good as so-and-so. I'm better than so-and-so. Or,
So the comparison is invested with a sense of self? Yeah?
So
Is
it's
that-
hard to see that at the moment.
But would you say that's the problem?
Well, sense of self is always
Yeah.
it's always a problem.
Yeah, but in this case, though it's not just me comparing apples and oranges, the comparison involves some self-denigration or denigration of someone else? Yes?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so that comparison is not functional.
Right.
It's somehow coming from what kind of intention? What's the intention that creates that kind of comparison? Sorry to examine you like this.
No, it's good. It's a great question.
Well, what we're doing in looking at our experience of life is we're observing stream of consciousness, right? So we function in the world, we do what we do, but also we have this second level of living going on where we're observing stream of consciousness, feelings, thoughts, and so on and so forth. And there's something in that stream of consciousness which causes you suffering. Something, that comparison arises and causes you suffering. That's what you have to see. What is the arising of that? What's the energy behind that? What's the mood that creates that? And that you have to see as an object rather than be the subject of that. Take something more simple, right? Let's say if you were asked to give the evening talk tonight, and you're up here and you're getting nervous, then it's quite obvious that, this nervousness has arisen because I want to be liked or something like that. So if you're a good meditator, then you can watch the fearfulness and nervousness as an object. And you can see how that creates the sense of self. If you keep attentive to it as an object, feel it in the body, as Luang Pors is saying, know it as an object, then it runs its course. So that's an easy one, right? Fearfulness, like anxiety. So in the same way, if you can see the reasons behind this comparing mind as an object rather than as a self, it's still there, but you see it objectively. Like you've been angry ever in your life? Probably. You've at times been angry. At times you've thought you shouldn't be angry, tried to repress it, but at times you've also known anger as anger. Correct? And that's freedom. Because now you see it as an object. So in more difficult constructs of our own individuality, it's harder to see that objectively. But if you you can go back to sound. You can listen to sound, and you can see that that's moving in awareness. And that's moving in awareness. You can see that as an object, sound as an object. You do that with an emotion. Doing an emotion that you know quite well. There's some emotions in you which will come up, and you know them quite. You don't believe in them. You just see them come up and they go. So that's the same thing. You're seeing emotion as an object of mind rather than being a self. Self-making, I-making, my-making, ahankara. So then you apply that to something more difficult. My principle is you begin with a simple, something very obvious like neutral things like sound, and establish awareness with that. And then you move that to the more complicated. It's the same practice. So if you can, let's say next time you're sitting anywhere, anything you're doing, just begin to make conscious comparing mind as an object. As you can do with anger, then it should unravel. And then the thinking mind will go into creating a self, and you'll come out, yeah, but what does it really feel like to be comparing? So then there's no longer the desire to rearrange it according to some ideal you have of it. But you see it as an object. Once you see it as an object, then it still has its kamma. It still has energy because it's been a part of your makeup for a long time. But it's no longer being fueled. Just like, take something like anger. When you fuel anger, you get more angry. That doesn't work. If you try to repress it, that doesn't work. And one day you say, oh, anger's in the guts. Feels this way, it's heat. You ride it out, dissipates, the fire goes. And that you have to apply to more subtle things, like comparison. And how the sense of self arises and so on. So seeing comparison as an object of mind rather than being the subject of that. It's not about being a person who never has that. Because then you're always just repressing it, resistance.
So the why is why because the way I was raised, blah, blah.
Doesn't matter.
The why is because I'm not seeing it as an object.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the subject of it. And take something that you do know how to work with that idea, because you have it. We all have that insight. And just apply it to the more complex parts of your psyche. Same insight. Yeah.
Nothing to do with impermanence then?
Well, there's three characteristics. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. When you're seeing it as an object, you're seeing it as anatta. Right? Or if you're seeing it as impermanent, the thing about impermanence is also it points to permanence. Yeah. The Buddha didn't teach just impermanence. He taught the unconditioned. If there was just impermanence, he wouldn't have transcendence. He wouldn't have nibbana. So by observing, like if you observe the sound of that airplane,